Ever since the news broke of the Charlie Kirk assassination, speculation has abounded as to whether the official narrative that we're being told, that the shot was taken from some 140 yards away on top of a roof, is actually where that shot was taken from. And there have been numerous theories that have alleged that the shot came from over the shoulder somewhere closer, from a handgun over here, or from the infamous exploding microphone. There was a story that ran almost immediately after the shooting. Actually, the day after, CNN ran it, and it just got buried in the noise.
Audio analysis does capture a signature crack and pop pattern in the video, and that says audio forensics expert Rob Maher that it is a single supersonic gunshot based on the time between that crack and pop sound and an inferred bullet speed. The firearm would have been located about 150 meters from where Kirk was using that podium.
It was very interesting. You see, a professor at Montana State University, who is the leading expert in the emerging field of forensic gunshot audio analysis, published his findings almost right away with just a little bit of audio that he had to sample at the time. And what he had concluded was that the shot was from a high-power, high-velocity rifle at a range of about 150 meters. Well, I didn't even see this story. I got it sent to me some weeks later, and I have spent the last week and a half, 2 weeks, just trying to go through some data and learning and understanding forensic gunshot audio analysis, because I think with the videos that we have now and the sound from those videos and the locations relative to Mr. Kirk, we can make some very, very, very almost concrete assumptions or inferences on what really happened that day. And it, to me, discounts a lot of the theory and goes to point in the direction that the official narrative we're being told about the high-powered, high-velocity rifle coming from where the government tells us is probably true. So, without any further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it. I have created a ballistic sheet on my computer that will show my findings. I have gone to the desert. I have taken test shots with a 30-06. With a 45, both handgun and a carbine, to simulate handgun shots and shorter range, lower velocity rifle shots. And I pulled all that sound data together, and I've also taken 3 distinct cameras that I was able to do my best with Google Earth to geolocate relative to Mr. Kirk and to where the alleged shot has come from, and work through some analysis with the waveforms to build out this table and give you some conclusions. First thing we got to do is talk about what is forensic gunshot audio analysis and how it works, and what we can tell just right off the bat from some of the audio we have. Now, the first thing we have to know is that supersonic rifle shots and pistol shots have a completely different sound signature. Here's the problem. You see, my overpriced piece of paper on the wall says political science on it. I'm not a sound guy. And as much as I tried, I couldn't get Dr. Maher to come on and talk about all this stuff. He's a busy man. He sent me an email with all of the same things he sent to the media that day when I asked him for some assistance and guidance. So I have the next best thing, and that's my friend Chet Pernicus Gipp. He is a polymath who specializes in whatever I ask him for the low rate of about $20 a month. Can you explain the difference between supersonic and subsonic rifle shots and the audio signature that we hear?
Absolutely. So the big difference between a supersonic and a subsonic rifle shot is all about the speed of the bullet compared to the speed of sound. A supersonic bullet is traveling faster than sound, which means it creates a shockwave or a sonic boom as it moves. That sonic boom gives you a really sharp crack in the audio signature. So if you hear that kind of whip crack sound, that's a clue that the bullet was supersonic. On the other hand, a subsonic bullet is traveling slower than the speed of sound, so it doesn't produce that same shockwave. Instead, you get more of a softer, muffled sound because there's no sonic boom. So the audio signature is really a lot quieter and less distinct, and that's one of the ways you can tell them apart just by listening.
Let's just start with what I've tasked you with doing here in this investigation so we could build out the ballistic sheet that we're now seeing on the screen.
Absolutely. So, what you've brought me in to do here is basically act as the technical brain behind the scenes. You had the big picture questions and the overall investigative approach, and I helped you translate that into the math and physics on the spreadsheet. So, what we did is you took all the known inputs, things like the positions of the cameras, the position of the target, and the timing gaps in the audio waveform, and we modeled all of that to figure out what kind of bullet speed and distance would match the data. In other words, my role is to help you take all those raw observations and turn them into a clear conclusion about what kind of shot is actually plausible.
You understand possibly the difference in these two sound profiles. And what that is completely dependent on is your ability to find the so-called gaps in the waveform. And to do that, I've taken all of these camera angles that we have seen here. I'll actually lay them out for you here on screen. I've taken 3 different cameras that are able to be geolocated relative to Mr. Kirk's position on that day. I've taken this camera, front camera. It's front and offset from him a little bit, and it is the closest camera I could find to his location. Let's get handgun guy out of there yet. We're not ready to introduce him. I have found that camera. I have placed it. I have gone through and taken the measurements and the bearings as best I can approximate to where Charlie Kirk is sitting. I've also done this with this right rear camera. It's kind of over here about 20 feet off to the right. I've taken another camera that is a further away camera, and this will be important when we go to triangulating things. This was one that was taken by the Utah Valley Review, the local campus news organization, and it is at a distance and at an elevated position, and I plugged all these in. I've put Mr. Kirk's location in, I've put his elevation in, all these other things. I've also taken our assumed alleged shot position and plugged all of those variables in, and you'll see that reflected in the sheet. So I also took my control the day I went out and I shot everything. You see those reflected across here, and I plugged all of those things in. I took the ambient temperature, the relative humidity, my elevations, the target elevations, the known distances and bearings that I was able to confirm. This is going to be important because this is the check or the control for that. I've also taken basically Mr. Kirk's all this same data and entered it into 3 different scenarios: the official government narrative, the handgun over here narrative, and the guy from up above and to the right. Now, you've seen where I've taken the physical data. If you're questioning the atmospherics that I put in here, I got those from weather history that was available to me in Provo off of Weather Underground. Provo, this sensor was approximately 4 miles away from where the shooting occurred that day. What I'm able to get, here's our daily observations from 11:56, okay? I split the difference here for the temperature, use the relative humidity. We know that the wind was not kicking up there. People have said it's windy. It was windy that day. The wind didn't come into factor until about 3 p.m. Before that, it was relatively calm and it wasn't gusty, okay? All these variables are important because they affect what the speed of sound is at any different time. The normal speed of sound is about 1,150 feet per second, but atmospherics play a big part in that, and that is important when you start measuring the 2 gaps in the sonic boom that you first hear and the muzzle velocity that follows behind it. Bullets traveling near or below the speed of sound, they just don't have that crack. 45 ACP, 22 long rifle, and even 9mm, which is technically supersonic, is barely supersonic. Rifle bullets, however, have a much bigger gap. They are generally traveling at 2 times the speed of sound, so that increases the amount of gap that you'll see in between those 2 numbers. And when you go to look at the waveforms, let's go look at one of these waveforms from one of my controls. Now, if you pull it over into the waveform analysis, it's a little bit clearer, but you see an initial boom. Okay, that is the supersonic shock wave reaching the camera, this here. Now, a lot of people get confused when they do this analysis because they think this next portion of sound is actually the muzzle blast from the gun, and it's not necessarily the case. That is actually a ground wave reflection from that same supersonic crack hitting some other point and coming back to the microphone. The actual blast is more nuanced, the muzzle blast is more nuanced, and it usually trails this secondary thing. You've got to really dig into the waveforms to find it, but for my sample gunshot, it was back here. So you hear crack, followed by another crack, and then the boom. Okay, what you do in this forensic analysis part of it is you measure the point from when you first hear the crack to the boom. And I do this in Audacity. Basically what I do is I come along, I find where the crack starts, I write down the number down below for the millisecond, then I go back to the second boom, or the muzzle blast boom, take that number, subtract the initial number for it, and you get what is called the waveform gap. Now, if you want to look at something like a 45 shot from 25 feet away, you don't see that. You have one boom. There's no supersonic crack involved in this. It's just boom from the muzzle blast and maybe the bullet arriving at the same time because they're so close and so tight together. Although, again, a 45 bullet subsonic, it doesn't have that crack. So it clearly tells you this is not a supersonic bullet. Now, if you go to some samples from the day of, let's look at that, the right angle, immediately to Mr. Kirk's right. You see two different signatures here. You got the crack, the echo of the crack, and then the start of the muzzle blast in here. So, let's look at another one. Here's the front wave. This one's a little bit more nuanced, but you have the crack, the reflection of the crack, then the muzzle blast boom. And then you have some lady screaming very immediately after that. But what you see in here too is there's a lot of noise that happens. So if you can do two things. You can pass this through the filter, or you can use an estimating tool. I'll show you here in a little bit. But these clearly don't look like a handgun signature. Now, if you want to talk about the muzzle or the blast from a microphone with a bomb in it, well, I took a 45 ACP contact shot. I basically walked up to something and shot it. Again, in this, you don't see a double pattern supersonic crack. You have one continuous blast wave. Again, another shot. This piece of evidence right here completely rules out any other narrative other than a supersonic rifle shot. A suppressed rifle from distance. I got a sample for you here too. We can do that. I took a long range shot with my 45 in a 16-inch Ruger LC carbine. You probably aren't going to hear the muzzle blast because I was so far away, and here's what that sounds like. With the muzzle blast removed, you just got the bullet skipping off of something. So that evidence right there clearly shows that this had to be a supersonic rifle bullet. Just no way around it. So all of our inferences from here on out are going to use velocities that assume an average of known supersonic rifle bullets, and especially around that 30 caliber mark, because again, we're being told it's a 30-06. We'll go with that. And that number is one that Dr. Maher used in his calculations, which is approximately 2,625 feet per second. We've put our inputs in. I measured them, right? We had everything before. We have the elevations of the microphones. I pulled all of that out of Google Earth. We've used bearings from the microphones to the target so we can get a sense of angle. And we've also taken those observed gaps that I just showed you how I got to and plugged them in there. And I've used a gap tolerance of 5 seconds and a distance tolerance of 25 feet. Hold on a second here. Hey, chat Pernicus. On the inputs page, the gap tolerance entries of the 0.05 seconds and the distance tolerance of 25 feet, what do those have to do with anything?
Great question. So those tolerance entries are basically the little margins we allow ourselves when we're matching up the modeled scenario to the real world data. In other words, the gap tolerance of 0.05 seconds means we're saying, hey, if our predicted timing is off by just a tiny fraction of a second, like 0.05 seconds, we're still going to consider that a good match. It's just a way to handle the tiny variations that are going to happen in the real world. Same idea with the distance tolerance of 25 feet. We're saying if the calculated range is within 25 feet of the real world position, we treat it as close enough to be a match.
That's what you're seeing there on the page. Now, that gives us a data of known inferences. It uses good old Pythagorean theorem, using the horizontal range, the known elevation distances, to then create a straight line distance from the microphone relative to the target. It has also adjusted the speed of sound based on the atmospherics we've put in to further go into the calculations. So now we can start introducing some assumptions. And for that, we go to the next page. Okay, what you're going to see here in assumptions 4 through 6 are the official narrative. And what we've done for that is we have put in the assumed shot target distance. So I went to Google Earth and I have measured the distance between the shooter and all of these different cameras and taken into account the elevation distance. If you see in the lower right, we've got an elevation on the roof of 4668. The UVU camera elevations at like 4622, and the ground level calculations from the other two cameras are at 4596. Now, I'm aware that the cameras are held at a little bit of a different height than what the ground level there is, but I'm just going to use that because it's constant and I don't really know how much higher or lower, okay? That's just what we're going to roll with. The margin for error in this, like we said, we've introduced, is to take into some of that account. So we've also factored in the microphone bearing degree from the alleged shooting spot to the microphones that are picking it up on each of those cameras. This is where all of the calculations that I don't understand and Mr. Chat Pernicus could clarify for us.
Absolutely. So on that assumption sheet in those columns, what you're seeing is basically the breakdown of coordinates and distances that we use to figure out exactly where everything is in relation to each other. So for example, the mic X feet and mic Y feet are just the coordinates of the microphone or camera in feet on a kind of grid. And the shooter X and shooter Y feet are the coordinates of the shooter. Then when you see something like DX or DY, that's just the difference between the shooter's coordinate and the microphone's coordinate in the X or Y direction. Basically, it's a way to measure how far apart they are, horizontally and vertically. And from that, we can calculate the straight line distance between them.
Okay, so that's what you see on column P then.
Exactly, you've got it. So in column P, you're basically seeing that final calculated distance between the shooter and the microphone.
Thank you.
It's the
All right, so that goes through, then it gives us the elevational distances, the shot distance from the straight line distance from the shot to the microphone, and then computes the speed of sound, the lateral offsets. And because we plugged in that sample velocity, it also gives us an expected gap. What that gap should be with that velocity and that particular set of atmospheric conditions and elevation. And what that does then is we put in our observed gap, and it can give us how far off the distance is in those gaps. And we can then look at that to see if those distances are within the tolerance when we go ahead and further evaluate our assumptions. Now, I've entered in the assumption of the handgun situation with this guy to Mr. Kirk's left, and I've also entered in another assumption based on somebody being up on this ledge here in the bushes, taking the shot over the shoulder. This also kind of would be a analog to some shooting here or something behind. And you see those reflected here. We got the assumed shot distance of 15 feet for the handgun guy, 115 for the roof, and the associated bearings with that. Assumed bullet velocity, I used 850 for a handgun. For a 45 or a 22 long rifle, We could plug in, what, 1125, 1175, 1200 for a 9mm, but we're still going to get the same result. What happens here is that then spits out an NA because there is no gap in a subsonic round, which we, again, can toss this right out if you want. And what the expected gap using the assumption of 25-26 for the velocity would be for the expected gap of a closer in shot at that same range. And what you see is, when you compare it to the observed gaps, the gap differences are quite more substantial for something that is in closer. It just doesn't fit, right? We can take that further with the consolidated assumption sheet. This cleans it up. I've made 2 assumption sheets. One, the handgun thing is right out, but we'll compare this with a closer range rifle shot. Now, this calculator here does some things that are pretty cool. Factors in the assumed shot to the target, the assumed bearing of the shot, which is what I've entered in my previous sheets, and again, that assumed number. We're seeing some things repeated here with the bearings and the elevations. Those are, again, things that I've put in as inputs. It also has modeled the Mach angle degree, and I'll get a quick explanation of the Mach angle degree for you here. Chat Pernicus.
So the Mach angle is basically the angle of the shockwave that a supersonic bullet creates as it travels through the air. It's just like how a boat moving through water creates a wake, and the angle of that wake depends on how fast the boat is going. If you're standing on the shore, the speed of the boat affects when and at what angle that wake reaches you. So in the same way, the bullet speed affects the angle of the Mach cone, and when that sonic boom reaches the microphones.
Once you plug in that Mach angle, it then comes out with the variable of, is this within the tolerance or not? And from what we're seeing, it's yes. This fits those expected tolerances. The other thing that this sheet specifically does is it comes out with an estimated range from the microphone and an estimated range from Mr. Kirk by pulling all of those calculations together. Now, a shorter range rifle assumption using the same variables. You got your distance, blah, 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 blah. Only one of those cameras was within tolerance, and that was the one that was the Utah Valley University camera, which was much further away from Mr. Kirk. The cameras that were close to Mr. Kirk both have that tolerance as a no. A very hard no, because our observed gap was that much different from what it was expected to have been, assuming the muzzle velocity of the rifle or the velocity of the bullet being at 26-25. I've taken our official assumption data that we have entered, and I've gone through and I've laid that into Google Earth for you. Let's first take the radius from the front right camera. Then we take the measurement from the rear right camera, and then the UVU camera shot radius. And you see, wherever these are gonna overlap the tightest is where your most likely source of the shot came from. And from what I'm seeing here, it's almost certainly to the, well, it's east of Mr. Kirk, and it aligns very nicely with where our alleged shooter location is. Also, I'm gonna give you that average shot from target that it estimated. So you have 4 circles that overlap in this general region. Now, yes, there are some other overlaps, and let's take a look at that. You have this region through here. Well, if you get down to it, the ground level below this, you clearly don't have a shot because there's a building in the way. Even if you were on this building here, you still have that roof in the way of your shot. See it? Okay. If you wanted to say maybe the shot came from this window over here because you have a lot of overlap, or this roof, you've got this whole building here in the way. And if you were to say it came from this roof instead, well, you're well within that circle. Same thing for a shot up here from the guy in the bushes. He's just too far inside of these circles to have taken that shot. And again, from the back, you could say that maybe if we went off of just the UVU camera, it could have been possible, but these other 3 lines that are pulling range just don't add up. The only feasible place where there is significant overlap in these shots is from where we're told the shot was taken. And to me, that pretty much solves any kind of dispute as to whether or not the shot was taken from a different location or taken with a different caliber weapon. None of this works out with anything else. Because at this point in time, I am now 99% certain that the gun that shot Mr. Kirk was smuggled in the way they said it was. It was assembled on site. It took a shot from the place and location and distance that we were told it was, and it was exfiltrated and left in the woods in the manner that we were told it was. We have DNA evidence that corroborates the alleged suspect to the shooter. We have photographic evidence of the shooter in ways that make perfect sense with this narrative. There is no doubt in my mind that the alleged suspect, Tyler Robinson, could have done all of the things he is alleged to have done to make this shot. And in fact, this evidence especially now proves that the bullet that killed Charlie Kirk could not have come from anywhere else than this rooftop. Okay, I shot an ending for this and I didn't like it, so I'm just coming back right now after I've finished the edit and talking to you here. I will give you links to all of the data that I've used. I'll just file it off onto a Google Drive and you can go grab it. I'll give you my audio samples of the test shots I've taken and the links to the source videos I've used, and also the KMZ pins that you see populated inside of that Google Earth map, and you can go check my work. I would love for you to peer review me and make sure what I'm saying is true, and also if you don't really understand it, you can play with it and get a better understanding of it. And I will set up a live here in the next 48 hours or so to go over exactly how I plotted all this in, and if you're watching this way in the future, I'll put a link to that once it's complete down in the description below. If there's interest in this particular little niche that we're doing here, well, then I'll invest the time and the effort to go through and make a more polished product that could be commercially available. But right now I think it's just more important to get the information out there and let people make up their own mind by doing their own work. Also, people have asked how they can materially support the channel. This isn't a full-time venture for me. I've never intended for it to be a full-time venture. I just wanted to go answer some questions that I had and bring you along. And if you want to see that continue, I would be absolutely grateful if you wanted to support that. But I have no interest in just making video after video after video to try to generate YouTube AdSense revenue. I have other things to do with my time and other ways I make my money. This isn't it. That being said, if you'd like to contribute, I have put links on my channel landing page you can go to. I'll also give you a couple of QRs here for a minute, and you can contribute that way. I'm also going to roll out a membership program, just a small nominal number, but what I will eventually do with that number is give you some more exclusive access and help me direct where I'm going to focus my time and energy on investigating this sort of thing. So you will get some value for what you put into it. Other than that, I got nothing else. I have to go move on now. It's time to go get some ballistics gel made and start seeing if we can get a bullet to stay inside a body. So until then, have a great day.